Part 32. Infinite Doomsday Start Draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 311. There is now a set of mechanical arm automatic loader in the cabin. When a machine gun is really needed, the gunner can use the coaxial machine gun next to the tank gun. The elevation angle is the same as the main gun, and it still can't reach the sky. With the MG3 of Inuk to contain it, the big dog runs faster. The two gods on the hatches on both sides were also scared by Anya's shot. They didn't play those fancy things, just unloaded the things and threw them back to the cabin. When they jumped back, they also closed the hatch. In this way, the aerodynamic shape of the helicopter returned to smoothness again, and the big dog continued to run away with a sense of ease. However, after the delay of the series of events, Ruger has already made the trailer. So he controlled the speed of the tank while shouting to Inuk next to him, "You keep an eye on it first, don't let it run away, I'm going to get a new guy." Okay. The two rogues on Inuk were sent by Sarah to the second sanctuary for further study, so they had naturally seen Ruger's so-called full metal alchemy. Hearing him say that, there was no doubt about how he got a new guy. The driver accelerated a little, and Inuk rushed out to chase the big dog. In just 3 or 5 seconds, Rogue on Inuk heard a burst of da-da-da gunfire coming from behind, which was much more rapid than his MG3. Looking back, it was the sound of the 4-linked machine gun on the weird external weapon trailer that Ruger had added next to the cockpit on the right side of the tank. Although the thing had no accuracy at first, it adjusted while firing, and soon let the 4 flames catch up with the big dog's butt. Sizzle. As the sound of a series of metal shells being torn apart by bullets came, the tail rotor of the Mi-24 was hit by the lugger, and black smoke immediately rose. As we all know, helicopters rely on the rapid rotation of the rotor on the top to obtain the lift required for flight. But if there is only a single set of rotors, the rotor will inevitably rotate with the fuselage at the same time. In order to stabilize the fuselage, it is necessary to find a way to offset this steering torque. There are many ways to offset, such as using 2 sets of rotors that provide opposite torques, so that it can be balanced. The non-coaxial Chinook transport helicopter and the coaxial Ka-50 armed helicopter are all like this. There are also ways to make the tail spray reverse airflow, such as McDonnell Douglas's MD-902. But in general, the simplest and most convenient way is to add a tail rotor. This is the way most helicopters choose. So, what happens when the tail rotor of this helicopter is damaged and does not work? That is what I said before. Without the counter torque of balancing, the fuselage will inevitably be carried by the rotor. So, everyone on the ground saw that the big dog, which was still flying flexibly just now, suddenly seemed to be drunk, and gradually fell from the air diagonally downward while spinning in circles. Hit it? Great. Nothing happened on the Ruger side, but the 2 rogue girls on Inuk cheered first. I was just worried, what if it continued to fly north? It's about to enter the northern forest area. When the speed drops sharply, we will definitely not be able to catch up with it. That's good, we finally solved it. By the way, what is this thing? The 2 rogues were chatting enthusiastically, but Ruger drove the tank next to Inuk. The 2 girls looked over in surprise and saw him fiddle with the strange-looking 4-barreled machine gun trailer twice, and then threw something at Inuk. Then the thing firmly sucked the external armor plate of their beloved tank. After that, the strange-looking trailer was pulled away from the tank by Inuk and turned into the rear trailer of his armored vehicle. What is this? Rog was puzzled. Anti-aircraft trailer. Ruggy smiled, "You did a good job just now. Now I will give you a new task, pull this thing back to the front line base. Tell your commander that this is a new weapon specifically for dealing with air enemies, and let her place it in a suitable place in the camp. In addition, this thing is very expensive. If you don't want it, don't use it to hit targets other than air enemies. If you don't have enough bullets, go to Tia for it. That's it, go quickly. Ah, the two Rog wanted to see the monster that Ruggy shot down from the sky, but after hearing his impeccable words, they could only mutter to themselves and pull the trailer back. The machine gunner in charge of MG3 saw that there was no way back, so he jumped out from the roof of Inuk, jumped onto the trailer in 2 or 3 steps, and fiddled with the quadruple anti-aircraft machine gun with great interest. Da-da-da. She really fired this thing very quickly. Use bullets sparingly. Ruger added hurriedly, and then drove the tank towards the direction where the Mi-24 fell. Luigi, did you deliberately send them away? Why? Anya asked curiously after Rog and the other 2 girls left. Yarug nodded, I have something to ask the ghost on the helicopter. If they are here, I am embarrassed to use some means. Oh. Although Anya didn't quite understand what the so-called some means meant, she still nodded gently. In her opinion, perhaps it was some torture that damaged someone's glorious and positive image. Actually, this is exactly what Ruger wanted her to think. But it was not what he really wanted to do. What he wanted to do was to use Sarah, the ghost pope, to suppress others. But the ghost pope was not something that anyone could know. Especially since this pope was none other than Sarah. He had to consider the feelings of Sarah's rogue subordinates when he used Sarah to suppress others. So, it was better to send the rogue girls on Inuk out first. After following the fallen Mi-24 Blacktail for a while, Ruger finally found the previous Big Dog helicopter in a dense forest. This place was already part of the forest north of the Stone Road. Strictly speaking, it was the dark forest. The surrounding broad-leaved trees were tall and dense, and I don't know how they grew so tall in the weather without much bright sunshine. Among the lush branches and leaves of 3 or 4 oak trees, the sick Big Dog was lying. At this time, there were 4 figures, 2 big and 2 small, near the Big Dog. The 2 tall guys were the female Rambo and the female Mage from before. They stood a little further away and were also responsible for the vigilance of the surroundings. The 2 smaller guys, who were probably less than 1.6 meters tall, were dressed as pilots. They were hugging the fallen Big Dog and sobbing and complaining about something. Ruger turned off the engine and faintly heard them crying about whether the Big Dog was going to die. A helicopter will die. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 312. Hearing this, Lugger finally understood that this Mi-24P with a wolf or dog mouth painted on its nose was actually alive. Google search reading. That dog mouth is not just a paint job, it really has a dog head. This helicopter is a ghost. In other words, this is a mechanical helicopter with the tissues and organs of a biochemically modified beast ghost. It is essentially a combination of a biochemically modified beast and a military machine, just like the grasshopper cannon and the cyber brute dragon. No wonder Lugger always felt that this helicopter was showing various expressions along the way. Or provocation, or surprise, or pain, or fatigue. It almost exposed the state of the helicopter itself with a dog face. Lugger almost thought that his mechanic skills were about to enter the master level, so he mastered some weaponry technique like bullseye-ongma. It can turn machinery into a BMW, and see through its own state by directly looking at its emotions. Good fellow, I thought I had opened my eyes and gained a special ability, but now I know that it was the helicopter that could really show emotions. This is really disappointing. In addition to being disappointed, Ruger felt a little empathy when he heard the 2 little guys who were less than 1.6 meters tall crying about the death of their big dog partner in 2 childish voices. As a mechanic, he always has an extraordinary intimacy with mechanical creations, even if they are enemies. For these 2 little guys with baby voices, this helicopter guy may really be their family's guard and the big yellow dog that grew up with them. The old dog at home is going to die, and whose little owner wouldn't be sad. The 2 sets of emotions from the mechanical side and the pet side were superimposed, and Ruger felt a little compassion. So he stared at the vigilance of the two adults over there and shouted to the two little guys, "Hey, what if I can keep it alive? What do you say?" It is not an easy thing to keep a Gaime mechanical beast alive. It's like treating people requires doctors, treating dogs requires veterinarians, and treating machines requires mechanics. To treat a biochemical mechanical beast, a compound talent who is proficient in both medicine and mechanics is needed. It seems difficult to find someone with such a wide range of expertise in the entire dark world. Perhaps, Tia can barely be counted as one. After all, she is proficient in the weapons of the Lost Ones and also in the production of alchemical potions. Even Ruger is far inferior to Tia, the genuine alchemical potion master, in terms of medical skills. But it doesn't matter, he has a system store. To be precise, his system store has a healing needle that can cure all injuries. He uses the healing needle to keep biological tissues active, and then he inspects, detects, and repairs the mechanical parts. He is really the second such cross-professional compound talent. In this way, his expression when he said that before naturally seemed full of confidence. After hearing what he said, although the others were still a little wary, a little boy dressed as a driver who was crying while holding the big dog's head looked at Ruger with tears in his eyes. "Only, as long as you can save our big yellow dog, I won't bother you about your attack on us before." Good guy. This paragraph is really, I can't complain. Let alone the fact that the big dog really has a typical local dog name. Even if you only listen to the last two sentences, there are many problems. Ruger originally saw that this little guy had a baby face and was not tall, and he cried so sincerely for his big dog, so he really thought he was a rare child with a pure heart. As a result, these two sentences really have hidden meanings. Ruger was directly laughed at by his words. "Wait a minute, it was you who provoked me first, and you were the ones who launched rockets at me first. How come I attacked you? Also, what do you mean by not arguing with me? Can you represent the four of you? You little brat, you are so clever even though you are small. This, that." The little boy obviously didn't expect Ruger to understand the trick in his words. Even if he could understand, he didn't expect Ruger to say it so directly. This seems to be different from what he learned from his master. So, he couldn't help but look at the female Rambo who was fiddling with the Gustav recoilless gun in his hand. He asked his master for help, but the little girl next to him, who looked at least 60% similar to him, immediately stood up and put her hands on her hips and said, "Aja said he wouldn't argue with you, which means we won't argue with you. You are so grown up, why are you still arguing with a child? Do you have the nerve?" Well, another add one for eloquence. This little girl who looks like the boy's twin sister is actually very aggressive. From her eyes, Ruger felt that her teacher seemed to be different from the boys. She was not the female Rambo who looked aggressive enough, but the mysterious female mage who was always hiding in the cloak. Ruger thought, what kind of weird relationship is this? The boy's teacher is a female warrior, but her personality is more like a mage who plays with intelligence. The little girl's teacher seems to be the female mage, but her personality is more direct and rough than the boy's, just like a little Rambo. How come the personalities of the teacher and the taught are misaligned? And they happen to be more like each other? What is this? Could it be like talking about crosstalk, where the father is a crosstalk talker, but if a child wants to learn crosstalk, he has to find a different teacher? A little boy has a personality similar to that of a female mage, so he has to worship a female warrior? Lugger was very imaginative, and he always felt that the relationship between these four charlatans was a bit too strange. After receiving the encouraging look from the female warrior, the little boy over there turned to look at Lugger firmly and said solemnly, "I, Li Ji, hereby promise that if you can save my Da Huang, the four of us will not only no longer be hostile to you, but I personally owe you a favor." Li Ji? Favor? Hearing this name full of oriental charm and this same oriental concept, Lugger couldn't help but look at this little guy carefully. Only then did he realize that this little guy had short black hair under the driver's helmet and a Chinese face that looked so handsome that other features could easily be ignored. This seemingly charming little guy is actually from China? Although the China of this world is different from Lugger's China, this is enough to make Lugger have a natural affection for this little guy. So, he just looked seriously at the little Chinese boy named Li Ji, then nodded, jumped out of the tank cockpit, and casually summoned the self-made Taijiman armor without accelerating the cannon from the air. After getting dressed, he stepped off the big dog. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi. Chapter 313. Seeing him wearing a set of armor made of the same material as the ghostly Iron Man, the four people who got off the helicopter all looked a little strange. Google search reading. But they didn't say much except exchanging glances. Ruger, who had been closely observing their movements, immediately caught their reaction and had a clue in his mind. He chose to wear the set of self-made Iron Man armor, not only to show them that he was still on guard against them, but also to use this thing to test their origins. And their reaction clearly told Ruger that they knew Iron Man. With this information, Ruger had a clear idea of their specific identities. Walking in front of the big dog helicopter, Ruger simply took off the helmet with the mask opened and threw it back into space, revealing his short black hair. He picked up the tools and started to check the big dog. While checking, he also paid attention to the expressions of the four people. The little boy's expression was the purest. His eyes were full of the big dog helicopter. His worry about it was beyond words. It was difficult for him to be distracted by other things. The ponytail girl next to the boy, who was a little taller than him, couldn't help but be surprised when she saw Ruger's face without the helmet. It seemed that she wanted to say, there are other people with black hair and black eyes like herself in this place. This made Ruger confirm that at least this little girl knew the specialness of her Chinese blood. Look at the two people behind. The female Rambo carrying Gustav was staring at Ruger's Leopard 2A4 tank. Those who didn't know would think that she was ready to aim the anti-tank recoilless gun in her hand at any time, but Ruger saw deep nostalgia in her eyes. This female Rambo? Has there been a tank before? Ruger was wondering, and the female Rambo over there seemed to notice that he was looking at him with his peripheral vision, and couldn't help turning his head to look at him. However, what surprised Ruger was that the look in the female Rambo's eyes when she chased him was not hostile or vigilant, but rather a kind of inexplicable friendliness. After nodding to Ruger vaguely, the female Rambo turned her head and looked back at the tank. Okay. Seeing her performance, Ruger could only say to himself in his heart that this elder sister seemed to be very friendly to him for some reason, so he turned his eyes to the last person. Finally, it was the witch who still hid herself completely in the cloak to play mysteriously, making it impossible to see any expression, and even her body movements were covered by the wide cloak, making it impossible to guess. It seems that no information can be obtained from this person. Ruger looked at the four people and the information he got made him feel much more at ease. Except for the witch who could not see any expression at all, the other three people did not have any intention of continuing to be hostile to him, whether from facial expressions or body language. They were not even very vigilant against the enemy. This confirmed what the little boy said before, he could indeed represent the four people and shake hands with Ruger. In this case, Ruger was relieved and began to treat the big dog helicopter. With Ruger's current ability, he only needs to put his hands on the big dog's body, use his telekinesis ability to detect the damage, and build a 3D model in the logistics space. He can draw a complete set of drawings of the big dog's biological tissue and mechanical body in minutes. Then mark the injured parts that are detected, and then treat them in a targeted manner. The treatment is also simple. Use the logistics space to rush out the parts that need to be replaced, replace them, and the problems of the mechanical body can be repaired. Then inject the treatment needle into the biological tissue part to restore its biological part to health. The connection between biological tissue and mechanical body, such as muscle tissue, such as nervous system, etc., as long as the biological part is biological and the mechanical part is mechanical, and they are treated in different categories, the treatment can be completed. Just by checking like this, Ruger can confirm that the strength of the biological tissue of this big dog itself can at least catch up with the cyber dragon he encountered in the ghost dungeon. Given its own toughness, it should have recovered quickly. The fact that it became so weak after a few shrapnel shells broke through its outer armor was mainly due to Ruger. He recently felt that shrapnel shells were good, but their absolute lethality to a single enemy was not enough, so he added some special potions made by Tia to the small projectiles. In short, he smeared poison on the tungsten alloy steel balls of the shrapnel shells. And this poison would cause continuous and repeated infection. That's why the big dog was so weak. It would be easier for the person who poisoned the victim to detoxify him personally. The most troublesome thing was how to take out the poisonous projectiles embedded deep in the big dog's body, but Ruger's telekinesis and logistics space were all done with one move of telekinesis, which was so convenient. So, under his treatment, within 2 or 3 minutes, the big dog's body stopped trembling and began to calm down. The little boy who discovered this situation became even more excited, and looked at Ruger with a more friendly look, and the last trace of vigilance of the people around him towards Ruger disappeared. However, Ruger still did not stop the treatment and was still dinging around the big dog. After all, this big dog helicopter is a joint creation of biology and machinery. The biological part has calmed down, but it does not mean that its injuries are completely healed. Ruger has not started to replace the damaged mechanical parts yet. At this time, realizing that the 4 people no longer had even the slightest hostility, Ruger relaxed and began to study carefully. This time, he was studying for himself. The harvest was even stronger than the other. First, after reconstructing the full set of Me-24P mechanical design drawings in the logistics space based on the body structure of the big dog, Ruger directly got the discount right for the corresponding helicopter in the system store. 30% off. However, considering that the price of this thing itself is not low, it is more than 30,000 points, so even if it is 30% off, Ruger will never buy it directly. It is okay to spend time to build it yourself. It is a good choice to use the 30% discount to buy the key parts that are quite troublesome and expensive for him to build. The second harvest is that from the biological organization arrangement of the big dog, Ruger finally cracked the technical essence of the strange organism to solve the problem of magic radiation. In fact, the way or idea of the strange organism to deal with magic radiation is closer to Tia's exorcism potion. Aren't the key electronic components in the electronic circuits of modern avionics easily damaged by magic radiation? Well, the guy may used biological tissue to wrap these key devices. At the same time, they also gave this part of the biological tissue the ability to absorb magic radiation, similar to the exorcism potion. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 314. On top of that, they went a step further. Google search reading. These biological tissues can transfer the absorbed magic radiation to other parts, or discharge, or use it, so that the absorption capacity of the original parts can always maintain a sufficient level. In this way, it can continuously provide protection for core electronic components. If magic radiation is compared to light, the charm is equivalent to adding a structure similar to plant chloroplasts to the flesh tissue, allowing the flesh tissue to absorb and utilize all the energy of magic radiation through photosynthesis and transfer it out. This technology is indeed quite advanced. If Ruger were to study it from scratch, it would probably take him several years or even longer to develop this thing himself. After all, he is still just a mechanic, not a bioengineer. but with the maturity of the charm biological tissue technology, it is not difficult for them to make this thing. If all the memories of the charm leader E52 were recorded by Lauke, Ruger might have been able to use this thing a long time ago. It's a pity that most of the key and useful things in that guy's memory were written and protected by it, so he couldn't get it. Fortunately, this time, by examining the big dog, Ruger finally mastered this technology. And he didn't have to worry about how to make it. He only needed to cut a small piece of the big dog's biological tissue remotely and put it back in the culture medium of the logistics space biological laboratory for cultivation and reproduction, and then give the big dog a treatment needle to stop bleeding and repair, and no one would know that he stole such a key thing from the big dog. It should be noted that the strange biological tissue like the big dog is not found in every strange ghost. It must be high enough. There was something similar on the Cyber Dragon at the beginning. However, there is no magic radiation in the area where it lives, only nuclear radiation from the nuclear reactor engine on its body, so the biological tissue on its body can only prevent nuclear radiation, and has little effect on magic radiation. A recent major research focus in Ruger's biological laboratory is to use the biological tissue that prevents nuclear radiation as a basis to find a way to improve it into a version that prevents magic radiation. It's just that Ruger's accumulation in biological science is not enough, so the progress is slow. No matter how he tried, he didn't expect that he would get the final product on the big dog today. This biological tissue will reproduce and grow in the laboratory culture medium. When it grows to a certain size, it will be put on the experimental table for magic radiation experiment. Once the experiment is passed, Ruger can expand the use of this thing. At that time, his modern tanks, led by Leopard 2A6, which he was reluctant to remove the electronic chips, can finally maintain their peak combat power and enter the dark world ground to kill all sides. At that time, the MG3 outside the loading hand cannon hatch, which has no meaning to exist, will be replaced with a set of at least double-linked 20mm machine guns, and then made into a remote weapon station form, and the Leopard 2A6 can walk sideways in the dark world. There is no natural enemy at all. Nightmare-level boss monsters come out and die with one shot. Iron Man Ghost drove out in a Land Cruiser, and it can still be penetrated with one shot. Just thinking about it, Ruger felt that the scene was very beautiful. Having harvested such a key good thing from the big dog helicopter, Ruger became generous when treating it. What about the treatment needles, which can be given in 3 shots directly? What about the damaged mechanical parts, which can be replaced if possible? He spent dozens of points on it. What? This amount of points is considered a lot. It is less than 1/10 of the points earned from Sarah from the ammunition and fuel sold every day. Well, for his usual way of spending money, it is definitely a lot. If this helicopter dog was his own equipment and he could slowly repair it himself, he would not even use 10 points. With his unscrupulous treatment, the helicopter dog quickly recovered from the dying state. De Huang. You are finally well. The little boy who had been staring at the helicopter dog saw that its expression had returned to calm and all parts of its body began to work normally. He couldn't help but pounce on it and hugged the dog's mouth, the nose. Seeing him like this, the other 3 also went to check the situation. After a while, the helicopter dog really flew up slowly, carrying the little boy in the air, turned around, and landed on the open space outside the forest. After confirming that the big dog had really recovered, the little boy stood in front of Ruger again, thanked him with gratitude, and once again stated that he owed Ruger a favor. And this time, even the little girl took a step forward and said, "Count me in. You cured De Huang, so you are my friend. We are the most loyal people in the gang. If you have any problems in the future, just call us directly." She said this like a little gangster. After hearing this, Ruger subconsciously looked at the witch who seemed to be the little girl's master, but he still couldn't see her expression under the cloak. However, he saw the witch picked up the two-handed staff in her hand and hit the back of the female Rambo next to her hard. Being attacked by the witch, the female Rambo did not resist at all. She looked up at the dark clouds in the sky with an innocent face, and muttered, "Well, the weather is good today, there should be no rain." "Not bad, very good." Well, it seems that the little gangster girl's 2 words were taught by her. After observing for a while, Ruger gradually figured out the relationship between the 4 people. The little boy and the little girl are 90% related by blood. And the little girl should be the elder sister. But the little girl is extroverted but somewhat frivolous, while the little boy is introverted but actually more stable, and from the words he said to Ruger at the beginning, it can be seen that his IQ is not low. So although the 2 of them are mostly siblings in life, in fact, the younger brother is the core and he is the master. Here, I have to say something more interesting. There are 2 adults following these 2 little guys. Just from the appearance, the female warrior who looks like a female Rambo should be at least 30 years old. Although the witch's face cannot be seen, her interaction with the female warrior shows that the 2 people's daily interactions are closer to a relationship of friends. This shows that at least the age difference between the 2 is not too big. At least the witch is not much younger than the female warrior, and she is not a child like the 2 little guys. In addition, the female warrior seems to be the teacher of the little boy, and the witch seems to be the teacher of the little girl, which is relatively obvious. However, in addition to teaching the 2 little guys, they did not interfere with their daily behavior. It is closer to a state similar to free range. The 2 of them are like the butlers and bodyguards of the 2 little guys. So in fact, the little boy who is the youngest among the 4 people in terms of age, status, or generation is actually the real core of the 4 people and the real person in charge. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 315. When Lugger confirmed this, he finally understood that the reason why the little boy came to talk to Lugger directly on behalf of the 4 people in the first place was not just because he was worried about Big Dog Helicopter's injury. He can really speak for the 4 of them. So, now, when he heard the little boy promise to owe him a favor again, Lugger was not as slightly suspicious as before, but seriously reached out his hand and shook the little boy's hand. This represents a formal reconciliation between the 2 parties. However, there was one thing Ruger he should ask. "Now tell me, why did you attack us just now? What's your origin?" This. It wasn't that the little boy didn't want to answer when he heard this, but it seemed that these 2 questions were more involved, so he couldn't help but look at the other 3 people. "Oh, let's be honest, why do you care so much?" Instead, a girl with a little ruffian's air stood up and said. "There's no big reason. It's just that we heard that a convoy passes by here every day, and it just happened to be able to come out recently, so we came to take a look. When I came over, I saw that your convoy here not only has light armored transport vehicles, but also so many heavy tanks. I feel a little itchy. So, I came here to tease you so that we can have a fight. For fun, let's have a good fight. What is the logic of this? Did the little guys like Hija attack his own convoy just because they were idle?" However, Lugger confirmed the little girl's words. She was the weapons operator on the helicopter and was responsible for the fight. The little boy is the pilot and is responsible for flying. "Besides, you didn't hit me first, I just fought back," the little girl finally said. "Why did I shoot first again?" Lugger laughed angrily. "You little girl, don't you know that I was shooting a warning and asking you to leave?" "What? Warning shot? What is that?" "I've never heard of it," the little girl said. "I don't believe you. Also, my name is not little girl, my name is Li Min. I'm Aja's sister." Okay, Li Min, right? After I warned you to shoot, you not only didn't leave, but directly attacked me. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me?" Lugger said with a smile. "What? What kind of compensation? Didn't we just agree that our previous debts should be written off and we can become friends again? Li Min said angrily. Is this how you treat your friends? Humph, you are not loyal. Nah, I just treat you as a friend, so I'm just telling you this lugger would not be fooled by such small talk. If we are not friends, and we really fight, you four will not have transportation tools. Can it outrun my tank? We have rhubarb. The little girl was about to move out the big dog helicopter, but suddenly thought that if the man in front of her hadn't cured it, they would have no use for the helicopter. However, even so, the little girl still looked confident, turned up her little nose and said proudly, don't think that we can't beat you without rhubarb. Let me tell you, our most powerful one hasn't been brought out yet. Really? What's your most powerful thing? The Iron Man armor. Lugger smiled and knocked on the homemade Iron Man armor on his body and said, I'm afraid I know better than you how much damage this thing can withstand. Do you want to know how many rounds it takes for my tank to blast through the armor on me? How much? Although the little girl was still holding back something else to say, she was still attracted by his question. But what was waiting for her was just a finger from Lugger. What? 10 shots? The little girl didn't believe it. What 10 shots? Just one shot. One shot can penetrate it, Lugger said with a smile. TCH, that's because the material of your armor is too poor. We are different. We are. When the little girl said this, she suddenly realized that she seemed to have leaked the best trump card of the four of them. Did I talk too much again? The little girl came back to her senses and couldn't help but lean into her brother Aj's ear and asked cautiously. Oh, forget it. The little boy covered his face helplessly, but quickly recovered his mood, looked at Lugger speechlessly and said, anyway, this guy has guessed our origins from the beginning, you can't say no, it doesn't matter. What? How did he guess it? The little girl asked in surprise, but we didn't say anything. You can see how familiar he is when driving a tank, and you know that he is no ordinary person, he is a professional tank driver, the little boy explained. Remember what we analyzed before, who killed that guy and indirectly helped us break away from the original shackles, right? Yeah, the little girl Li Min nodded hurriedly. They are an adventurous team that can use tank artillery. They killed the original bad guy. Well, so our new friend now is probably a member of the original adventure team, or even the leader. After the boy Aja explained to his sister, he immediately asks Yang Luj, I haven't asked yet, how do you call your friends? Luji. My last name is Luji, so you can also call me Brother Lu. TCH, Lugger is just Lugger, and you still want to call yourself brother? Don't look at us as if we are younger than you. After all, we should be over 40 this year, the little girl said arrogantly, still turning her nose up. It's just that part of our time has been stolen because of some things. Ruger didn't know why, but he couldn't help laughing when he saw this little arrogant girl. Maybe it was because the contrast between her appearance and body language was too big, which made her look funny. Hearing her say that, Ruger couldn't help but laugh and said, is it such a coincidence? Me too. But I heard from them that 50 years of my life were stolen, so if you really count it, I seem to be almost 80 years old this year. Well, you shouldn't call me Brother Lu, you should call me Uncle Lu, Grandpa Lu. What ghost? I don't believe it. You are the worst person, you are full of nonsense, and you don't tell the truth. The little girl made a big grimace at him and turned to run to the witch. I don't know if she went to complain to her teacher or to complain. Seeing her running away by herself, Ruger and the little boy didn't stop her, but they all breathed a sigh of relief. The two boys couldn't help but look at each other, and then smiled at each other. At that moment, it seemed that the two of them had reached an inexplicable, unspoken understanding. It's not easy to lead the team, right? Ruger asked half-jokingly. Not bad, the little boy touched his head, and then smiled shyly, Just a little tired sometimes. Ruger nodded. It's normal, you get used to it. Anyway, we are all friends, so I won't joke and ask directly. You are the Iron Man of the Wind Group. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shanmao Aichiji. Chapter 316. Wind Elephant Team. What is that? The little boy was stunned when he heard this, but then nodded and said, but you are right what you said later, we are all Tegaman. However, we do not belong to any force, let alone anyone. We are free. We are our own Tegaman warriors. Free, Ruger read the sentence playfully and said with a half smile, in other words, you are homeless wanderers. The little boy wanted to retort, but he really didn't know what to say. The man in front of me seemed to be smiling all the time, and he did not show any hostility towards me, but he was putting so much pressure on me. It was as if no matter what he said or did next second, he would predict it. The feeling of being completely seen through by others is really, really unsafe. Is this the strength of a man who successfully killed the big devil who had restrained the four of him for 20 or 30 years? It's so scary. Seemingly sensing that the little boy was inexplicably wary of him, Luger couldn't help but be slightly startled. Are you afraid of me? Why? What do you think? The little boy almost cried when he heard this. You even noticed that I was afraid of you, and you still ask me why I was afraid? Don't you know how to read minds? Read it yourself. Although he didn't say a word, the little boy's face had all these words written in his heart. This. Luger couldn't help but stretched out his hand and touched his nose, feeling a little embarrassed. In fact, he doesn't know how to read minds. He doesn't even read countless people, but he can recognize people by face. Simply because this little boy looked very similar to someone he was once very familiar with. Seeing this little boy, it was like seeing that person. So no matter what the little boy thinks or does, Ruger can guess it accurately. There was no way, he was too familiar with that person. These judgments can be made subconsciously. That person is himself. His younger self. Shaking his head helplessly, Luger calmed down and said softly, I don't know how to read minds. It's just like an old friend of mine. If I guess you as him, it will be easy to guess, that's all. Seeing that although the little boy was still a little unconvinced, his expression softened. Luger smiled and asked other questions. Well, you don't have anywhere to go now, do you? Why not go to my place? I'm not asking you to join me. In your words, you are still free. Just think of it as a visit to a friend's house. How? This, I have to discuss this with other people, the boy Aja replied. The result of the discussion was actually fruitless. Both the female warrior and the witch have the attitude of following the two little guys' wishes and going wherever they want. As for the little girl Li Min, if she was still indispensable before, but now she has a lot of opinions about Lu Ji, and she is a little awkward. Luger didn't care. Anyway, he just hit 3 shots if he had some dates but no dates. But after knowing that these 4 were all charming Iron Man, he especially wanted to know who they corresponded to. Well, little boys and girls have the best guess. Since they are twins, they are probably Geminis. Anyway, there must be 2 Geminis, which is an old tradition. I don't know who the female warrior and the witch are. Libra. Water bottle. Or maybe Scorpio. Sarah herself believed that she could fully control the 6 Tejamans. 2 of them were slightly affected, but the remaining 4 did not obey orders at all. However, Lu Ji knew that one of the 2 people she had slightly influenced was actually completely disobedient. In comparison, the 3 people who are the fire sign Leo, Sagittarius, and Shepherd, plus the earth sign Virgo and the water sign Pisces Cancer, these 6 are all Sarah's diehards. According to her, the earth sign Taurus and the air sign Gemini can influence them, but they are reluctant to do so. The sign of reluctance is that these 2 always say yes every time they are transferred, but in fact they never show up. The remaining 4 people, the earth sign Capricorn, the water sign Scorpio, and even the air sign Libra and Aquarius, are completely missing. Well, Sarah didn't know that Geminis are always 2 people. As for the earth sign Capricorn, Lugger had seen him in the charming dungeon before. He is a man of not short height, so naturally he does not fit in with the 4 people here. He could only guess from the remaining few. He guessed with great interest that at the same time, the 2 little ones over there were already arguing. My sister Li Min doesn't want to go to Lu Ji's place, that's what I'm talking about. But his younger brother Li Ji doesn't have to go. He just expressed his dissatisfaction with the reason given by his sister for not wanting to go. I think the reason I think that person is unhappy, so I won't go is not sufficient. After arguing, the 2 of them pulled up their own backup. Maria, I would like to advise your apprentice, he is always so incomprehensible, he will suffer a lot when meeting girls in the future. It was my sister Li Min who said this, and she started with a set of punches. And the person she was talking to was the female warrior who looked like a female Rambo. A female warrior named Maria with a little boy. Isn't it? Ruger said in his heart. The first generation Rebana just came out, and now we have a second generation immortal female warrior? While he was suspicious, he heard that the boy Aja had also approached Li Min's witch master and said to her helplessly, "Teacher Isandra, I..." Before he finished speaking, Ruger heard Anya in the tank behind him scream, propped up the hatch with her hands and feet, and rushed to the 4 people in a flash. Ye, Isandra. You are the elemental witch Isandra. What? Ruger thought that his precious granddaughter was sick again, but he saw the witch slowly took off her cloak, revealing a face that was still beautiful despite the frost. And a set of witch equipment, such as the golden headband on her head. This person is actually dressed like a typical elemental wizard witch Nephilim. What is this person's name, Isandra? Ruger finally understood why Anya was so excited when she heard this name. This person is the wizard who left a complete inheritance of the elemental witch power system to Roguetown. Or to put it bluntly, she is the witch Benwu from the 2nd generation of the original work. Akara, a senior nun of the Blind Sisters, also knows elemental magic, but she does not master the complete elemental magic system. After the cataclysm, with the help of a female mage who was proficient in 3 elements of magic, she left behind the complete system that Anya is learning now. The female mage who can be said to be the common ancestor of the witches in Roguetown, could it be that she is the person in front of her? It is you, Lady Isandra. Seeing the face of the witch under the cloak, Anya screamed again, but, didn't you disappear more than 30 years ago? Where did you go when you fell to the ground? Well, why haven't you aged at all? Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu Mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi Ji. Chapter 317. Who are you? The witch Isandra was a little confused when she noticed that Anya was particularly familiar with her life experience. My name is Anya, and I'm a frost wizard. Oh, my master is the ice maiden Katarina, the disciple of Master Akara, Anya said excitedly. Ah! Little Katarina, is that the naughty girl who loves to eat snowflake candy the most? Even her apprentice is this old. Time flies so fast. The witch's face was full of endless emotion. Yes, is that so? Anya really hadn't heard the gossip about her serious master and adoptive mother who had extremely high requirements for herself. Hearing the great wizard's evaluation of her master as a greedy naughty boy, Anya's little head couldn't help but buzz. This gave her a shock no less than when Akara pointed at Ruger and said to her, "This man who is only a few years older than you is your grandfather." However, since the 2 sides had a secret code, there was no need to hide their origins anymore, so they just talked about it directly. Since the cloaked witch is on the right side, and she is actually the oldest of the four, let's talk about it from her perspective first. Isandra is an elemental witch, there is nothing to say about that. As early as 50 years ago before the catastrophe, she came to this area as an adventurer and established a good friendship with Akara, who was a few years older than her. After the catastrophe, she also helped the rogue camp to accommodate survivors, and after rogue gradually stabilized, she began to travel around to help the weak survivors survive. During this period, she also selected those survivors who had good magical compatibility, enlightened them, and sent them to Akara to receive a more comprehensive and stable education. It can be said that the original witches and wizards in the rogue camp have all received a certain degree of her favor. Anya's adoptive mother, Katarina, was also brought back to the rogue camp by her more than 30 years ago. However, about 30 years ago, or 29 years ago, Rogue Town discovered that it had lost contact with this female wizard. When the Rogue Town side went to the small gathering area near the ruins of the Stone Plain Fortress where she had been recently, they found that both the buildings and the people there had disappeared without a trace. Everyone was missing. The ruins of the Stone Plain Fortress had since completely turned into the Stone Plain Wilderness. This was the last information about her from the Rogue Town side. And there was more information from the witch Isandra. The reason why she stayed in that small gathering area of human survivors for a long time was because she found another good seedling, a magic genius. And this time, she wanted to take her in as her true successor. So she didn't rush to send the child to Rogue Town, but taught her herself. This small gathering area located in the ruins of the Stone Plain Fortress is called Mado. Although the number of people is not large, the combat effectiveness is not low. They have guards themselves, and there are 3 masters. Although these 3 are not Nephilim, but only lost ones, they all have their own lost one weapons, that is, firearms. With their skilled gun skills, they can even form a group to go to the monster nest where nightmare-level monsters gather. It is precisely because of this good combat power that they did not gradually gather in Rogue Town like the survivors of other small settlements, but instead held onto their own territory. The 3 masters are Iron Man Apache, Falcon Faye, and the immortal female warrior Maria. Maria, that is, the warrior who looks like a female version of Rambo. Although Maria is unmarried and childless, she adopted a pair of twin orphans. They are Li Min and Li Ji. Their parents are both of Chinese descent. Tracing back, they seem to be the descendants of international students in a university town in Zhou country. In the displacement after the catastrophe, this pair of last offspring was left behind. And the magic genius that Isandra took a fancy to was the older sister of the twins, Li Min. Sister Li Min learned magic from Isandra, and brother Li Ji continued to learn how to fight with the weapons of the lost from his adoptive mother Maria. If nothing unexpected happens, they will grow up to be quite strong fighters among the human survivors. However, the last thing in the end of the world is accidents. About 30 years ago, in a demon tide attack that was much stronger than before, everyone fought hard and barely controlled the situation. However, just as everyone was preparing to counterattack, a strong earthquake suddenly broke out around Maduo town, followed by a large-scale landslide. The entire gathering area, including the invading monsters from the surrounding areas, fell into the huge crack in the ground. When everyone woke up again, they found that only the 4 of them were still alive in the whole town. And they were still trapped in a huge biological tissue meat nest. Combined with the original location of their Maduo town and the fact that they are now the Ghost Iron Man, it is not difficult to guess that the so-called earthquake was caused by the Ghost Leader E52 of the Ghost Underground City. In short, although the 4 people were alive, they soon lost control of their bodies. What happened afterwards was like a long-lasting dream for them. They could not control it or figure it out. The whole process seemed so unreal. During this period, they should have been transformed into ghosts and stored as some kind of reserve. When Isandra regained her consciousness again, it was unknown how much time had passed. And the person who pulled her back from that sleepwalking state was actually the younger twin brother, Liji. Hearing this, Anya was still shocked by the mysterious identities of the four people, but Ruger had already shaken his head helplessly. If it weren't for the close contact with Maria and Liji, Ruger, an old player, would not have reacted. The immortal female warrior Maria and the war orphan she adopted, this is actually the background setting of the protagonist of another game. Metal Max 2. The protagonist of the second generation is the child adopted by Maria. It can be customized as male or female. The original name was Hunter, and later changed to male name Ken and female name Reina in the remake. These are far from the current situation, so there is no need to mention them. The most important thing is the setting of the protagonist, who was adopted by an unmarried woman named Maria and finally saved the world. Well, this is very messianic. Ruger thought to himself that it was no wonder the Dark World actually intersected with the Metal Max world, so it turned out to be derived like this. The same monotheistic setting was used, so it naturally became one of the many worlds in the eternal war between the Supreme Heaven and the Burning Hell. Then there are many worlds that can appear in this huge universe of eternal war. Now, the little boy adopted by Maria in this revised version seems to have once again become the key to redeeming the four people. Is this a coincidence? Or is it somehow in line with the core structure of this universe? So it is obviously a low probability event, but it appears one after another. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai-Chi-Ji. Chapter 318. When Isandra talked about being rescued by Xiaolja, she let the person involved take over the conversation. Well, my memory is similar to that of teacher Isandra, the boy Liji said. However, in that groggy sleep, I gradually realized that I was dreaming, and gradually felt that I could wake up at any time. Well, the boy who was wrapped in a nest of biological tissue and lived in his sleep every day, one day realized that he was dreaming and tried to wake up on his own. This routine sounds familiar again. Very neon, very black trench coat and black sunglasses. Taiwan novel network rightward arrow. Very, savior. Then one day I really had to wake up. Well, you didn't use the little red and blue pills, right? Then you are better than Neo. But I could feel that something in my head was trying to get me to go back to sleep. I was afraid of alarming it, so I pretended to be drowsy. It actually thought I had fallen asleep again and became calm. Later, after a period of testing, I finally confirmed that it was a bug that got into my head. This is how it controls my brain. But what it doesn't know is that I have a strange disease since I was a child, and there is a large sarcoma in my brain. This is what teacher Isandra checked out for me. Seeing the little boy looking at her when he said this, the cloaked witch nodded and confirmed, that thing usually doesn't have much negative impact on his body, but it can't do mental exercises like meditation, so it can't study magic. Yet, I also know that I probably won't survive long with this thing in my brain. I just didn't expect that this kind of thing that can get into people's brains and control people happens to be right here, the little boy continued. So, it thought it was controlling my brain directly, but in fact, it was controlling my brain tumor through a layer. Although I can feel its orders, I am not under its absolute control. I've been waiting for the opportunity to figure this out. Finally one day, we were expelled from the nest of biological organizations, and under the orders of the brainworms, we went to our own territory to receive our subordinates. That's when I realized that we had been transformed into a kind of biological weapon. We are existences similar to the Knight class, leading our soldiers to fight for the real Lord, the guy who transformed us. But without that guy, the opportunity I've been waiting for will come. Finally one day, when the bug in my mind was unprepared, I pierced my nose with a sharp arrow and penetrated it directly. Because I was afraid of hurting my brain, the arrow didn't penetrate deeply enough to kill it directly. It was still shaking and rolling around in my head, trying to control me again. But because of the sarcoma, it actually didn't affect me that much. Even so, I was in a coma for a long time at that time. Until it completely subsided, I slowly tried to use other things to suck it out of my head bit by bit. This method is actually the treatment method that teacher Isandra proposed for me. It's just that the failure rate of this method is too high. There's no need to do it before that thing threatens my life. She just told me how to do it, what kind of tools can be used to do it, how to use simple materials to prepare these tools, etc. I didn't expect that one day I would really need it. Listening to the little boy describing these things calmly, Luodu felt like his head hurt. What kind of fairy tale is this? But thinking about it again, it seems that in his time there really was a minimally invasive surgery that went in through the nose to extract brain tumors. Normally, the human brain is protected behind the skull and is not connected to the nose. But going by the nose is indeed closer, and the obstacles in the way are easier to deal with. Otherwise, why wouldn't the minimally invasive surgery be performed on the back of the head? In addition, Taijiman's radom bug controls the host by controlling the brainstem and brain, especially the former. It enters through the mouth, and most likely it enters the brain through the relatively weak part of the skull behind the nose. Or even settle down right here. No wonder the little boy Li Ji said that the radham worm that controlled him happened to have got into his brain tumor. This position is right. That is, how big is the little boy's brain tumor? I have seen the radom bug lugger before. That thing is at least the size of a human fist, right? A brain tumor the size of your fist? Luodu looked at this little guy who was less than 6 meters tall and thought it was a miracle that he survived. In this way, I escaped from the control of this insect and roughly understood the principle of how it controls our brains. Next, I started thinking of ways to help them take out the bug. However, I am the only one with a brain tumor. If they simply copy my method, I'm afraid they will die together with the bug. So if I want to help them remove bugs, I have to find a way to stun those things first so that they can't move, and then I take action. I did countless experiments in the meantime, and finally found that the simplest anesthetic, alcohol, can do it. So, I first looked for an opportunity to help teacher Isandra revive. Why Isandra first? At this time, Anya, who had heard a series of secrets, also woke up from her initial astonishment and asked subconsciously. Because, teacher Isandra knows magic. Remote object movement, Anya woke up. That's right, the little boy nodded. As long as teacher Isandra wakes up, it will be much more convenient to help Maria or sister Min remove the brain worm later. Really smart, Anya couldn't help but sigh. Although Ruger had the same feeling in his heart, he still patted his granddaughter's head when he heard it, as if actually, our Anya is also very smart. Making Anya happy and a little embarrassed. With the help of teacher Isandra, things will go much more smoothly later. After thanking Anya for the compliment, the little boy continued to tell the story. Soon, we took out the last 2 brain worms, and the radom worms. It was because Maria was too quick to act. As soon as she woke up, she picked up a knife and killed her radom worm. Sister Min wanted to follow suit and took out her knife. Fortunately, teacher Isandra was quick to collect the worm with a magic container. Why? Do you still want to study it? Anya asked in confusion. Because they are still in the group of ghosts, Ruger explained. First, they are knights, and they have countless ghost troops under them. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi. Chapter 319. But if they all escape the control of the radham bug, whoever really controls them will notice. Google search to read, Ruger continued. Their nominally charming subordinates will come first to drown them. No matter how powerful they are, without knowing the surrounding environment or the way to leave, the most likely outcome will be that they will be killed by Suimei. The greater possibility is that after being captured by the charm, they were pulled back and sectioned for study to study how they escaped from control to prevent this from happening again. Yes, really, Anya was still a little suspicious, but the little boy over there nodded and admitted, yes, that's true. However, we already knew at that time that the guy who controlled us had the ability to directly contact the radon bug in our brains. It's just that this kind of contact is one way under normal circumstances. The guy only needs to give orders to the radon bug unilaterally. If there is a situation that needs to be reported, the radham bug will have to use some other things to do it. So, leaving the last radon bug means that we can still pretend to be controlled by that guy and continue to lurk there until we find the safest way to leave. I see. This radham bug is like a radio, or even a legendary portable communication tool that was popular for a while before the advent of mobile phones, pagers and BP machines. This thing can receive text messages, but cannot reply directly. If you want to reply, you have to find a public phone. But it's also much more convenient than a traditional wired landline. But on the side of the little boys, they can learn the instructions from the guy who controls them, the charming Commander E52, through the radon bug pager. And if they need to report it, they can find a phone, pretend that they are still being controlled, and report the information directly. So, in the case of charming Commander E52, the four of them are still Tegaman warriors firmly controlled by it. Reasonable, very reasonable. After that, we have been preparing to leave. The biggest opportunity was when the monster that controlled us suddenly sent us a signal to come back for help one day. It seems that it has encountered an enemy that is difficult to deal with. And we are responsible for the fastest flying units. We know that the greater its danger, the greater our opportunity. If it is killed by a strong enemy, then we will naturally be able to get out of trouble, and we can even try to control its countless subordinates. But we can't guarantee that it will definitely lose, so we can only send a small forward reconnaissance force to rush for reinforcements while pretending to be mobilizing large forces but encountering unexpected problems that need to be solved. After that, it seemed to realize that something was wrong, and simply issued a will-like order to all Taijaman. Therefore, as long as Taijaman can arrive at its base first and get the command market left there, it will the next Pope. Pope is the position it has given itself. Hearing the news, we thought it was more likely a trap. If we believe what it says and suddenly send troops there, it will naturally reveal that we didn't send troops before because we had ulterior motives, rather than because we really couldn't leave. So we still stand still and just continue to send more reconnaissance units over. Furthermore, because of the command system established by the guy who calls himself the Pope, basic reconnaissance units and the like are not allowed to enter the Holy Land where the Pope is located without the presence of senior commanders like us. So even if these reconnaissance units will help it share some of the pressure after passing by, as long as the other party finds out that they cannot enter, it should be able to buy them more time. But we stood still because of our suspicions, but the other Tegaman believed it. Fortunately, that guy was killed soon, and another Taijaman inherited his command position and called himself the new Pope. It's just that we haven't heard of this new Pope Taijaman. Moreover, her ability to control the radham bug seems to be even lower than before. We speculate that this may be related to the fact that she just inherited the command. Then as time goes by, her control over the radham bug should steadily increase. At this point, we finally decided to take advantage of this opportunity to escape from that place once and for all. Just in time, we have Big Dog, who is probably the fastest flying guy in the entire monster army. With it, we can hide from everyone and all the monsters. I see. Luge nodded while listening, thinking that when he was in the dungeon of the dungeon, there were still so many things going on in the dungeon. As for why Sarah can become the new Pope, Tia has no clue of this, and Sarah can control other Tejaman, But Tia is not affected at all. The key now seems to be the radom bug on. If Tia's radom bugs were eaten by her host, then she would be like the four little boys and become a Tegaman who truly has her own consciousness and is free. Sarah went even further. Not only was she not controlled by the radom bug, but she used her Andariel skills to subdue the radom bug as a pet. Strictly speaking, the real new pope of the strange charm is actually her radom worm. And she is the master of the new pope, and her ecological niche is one level higher than E52. However, it seems that because of this higher level, her control over the strange charm system has a sense of alienation. Just like hitting a ball directly with your hands or hitting it with a root racket, the technical means are different in difficulty. Of course, after long-term corresponding training, hitting a ball with a racket can still be practiced to be as flexible, as good, or even better than hitting it with your hands. So from this point of view, the four little boys guess that the new pope has just taken over the command, so the command is not smooth is also correct. In addition, the radom worm left by the four people is the one in the head of the twin sister Li Min. This means that when replying upward in the way it provides, whether it is the original E52 or the later Sarah, they will think that it is Gemini Li Min who is replying to them. After Sarah took over as the new pope, the four of them must have used their previous acting experience to continue to flatter Sarah, making her think that Li Min was also partially obedient. As a result, Li Min became one of the two free men after the Core 6. So, you just escaped from the ghostly dungeon recently? Ruger thought for a while and asked. Infinite Doomsday Start draws Luodu mechanic. Author, Shan Mao Ai Chi Ji. Chapter 320. Yes, just a few hours ago it was her sister Li Min who answered. The new pope seems to have made big moves recently, and he even took away our control over his subordinates. Searched Can on Google. Fortunately, we dismantled De Wang's control module from the beginning, otherwise she might have even dispatched De Wang. But it's not bad either. She mobilized troops on a large scale, which naturally created a gap for the troops to defend the lair. Let's take this opportunity to fly out with rhubarb. Great, now there is only the last bit of information left to fill in. Lugger nodded and asked directly, so, you two siblings are twins, what about the other two? What? How do you know our Tegaman codename? Who are you anyway? Li Min exclaimed. Lugger chuckled lightly and said, didn't Aja just say that I am the gainer and loser human adventurer who killed the big monster that controlled you? But, even if you kill it, how do you know our code name? Is it possible that you really have the ability to read minds? As Li Min spoke, he couldn't help but shrink back in fear, as if to avoid Lu Ji's mind reading. Mind reading? I really can't. Lugger smiled and shook his head, but my girlfriend's pet can. But strictly speaking, it should be called mind eating. The old pope who controlled you was eaten by it, so it naturally learned a lot of information. Hearing this, the girl who had been staring at Lugger couldn't help but shuddered, and there was a hint of dodge in her eyes. Seeing her like this, Luge couldn't help but laugh. Don't be afraid, as long as you are obedient and don't do bad things, I promise not to let it eat your brain. I'm not afraid. The little girl wrinkled her little nose and said stubbornly, that's disgusting. Yes, disgusting. What, you actually have a pet that eats other people's brains? How disgusting. Our rhubarb is still the best. Indeed, Lugger nodded cooperatively this time. You destroyed the command transceiver organ. Strictly speaking, it can be regarded as a free charmer. But he still risked his own life just to please you. He is really a loyal and good dog. Of course, the little girl said proudly after hearing this, but soon realized that Lu Ji's words sounded awkward, and she couldn't help but raised her eyebrows and said angrily, what do you mean by this? Tell me what you have to say. Why are you so secretive and criticizing? Isn't it? Luge raised his eyebrows and looked at her and said, you just feel itchy and want to fight, So you just attack someone whose identity you don't know and whose combat power you don't know. You caught up with me this time and paid careful attention to your strikes. But even so, wasn't your rhubarb knocked to the ground by my tank gun? If I hadn't happened to be able to heal the body as well as repair machinery, do you think your Dawang would still be alive now? Lugger continued. If I had used a more powerful and more effective full-time anti-aircraft gun from the beginning, your big yellow would have been killed by me while it was directly in the sky, and there would be no way for me to save it. What's the cause of all this? What's the reason it almost died? It's just that you are going crazy and want to find someone to fight. For such a ridiculous reason, Dawang's life was almost lost. You said it yourself, your behavior was wrong. After being scolded by Luge, the little girl's expression changed from her previous arrogance, and she couldn't help but pout in a grieved tone. I had the intention to retort, but when I thought about it carefully, it seemed that the hateful man was really right. Dawang took a turn on the edge of death this time. In the final analysis, it was really because of himself. After understanding this, she stopped being pretentious with Lugger, turned around and ran to the big dog helicopter, hugged the big face with the cigar in his mouth, and cried loudly, "Dawang, I'm sorry." Hey, you made that little girl cry, isn't it good? Seeing this, Anya felt that Luge was right, but she still knocked on his armor and whispered in his ear. Although it was whispered, the sound could be heard by everyone around him, including the big dog helicopter. Her words were 30% inquiring and 70% protective. This is like a child who is naughty and gets into trouble outside. The adults rush to teach the child a lesson before others say anything. Under normal circumstances, others would be embarrassed to scold them. Of course, this is limited to low-level accidents. Something like accidentally stepping on someone else's foot. Seeing her like this, Luge couldn't help but touch her little head, but he smiled and said, "Don't worry, I'm saying this for her own good. If she learns from this lesson, the arrangement will be better for her, for the big yellow, and for the people around her." Sometimes, even if people around her try to persuade her about this kind of thing countless times, she won't listen. But if someone like me says it once and she doesn't like it, she will remember it very clearly. So, you see, the two parents, including this brat brother, didn't say anything. Yes, is that so? When Anya heard this, she looked at the female mage over there, then at the female warrior beside her, and then at the little boy in front of Luge. She found that although their expressions were different, most of them had different expressions. It's helplessness with a little bit of luck. It seems that they really wanted the girl to hear what Ruger said, as Ruger said. Okay, it seems to be true. Anya nodded in confusion, but how do you know these? Alas, people have the same heart. Ruger touched the girl's head again after hearing this. Parents are always worried. His words and actions, originally used on a girl who was not much younger than him, seemed as strange as possible. The three Iron Men over there also looked puzzled. However, when they found that although the girl's expression was a little unhappy, it was more shy than disgusted and angry, it was even stranger. Ruger's words and actions felt like the girl's father. However, the girl herself actually acquiesced. Could it be some kind of strange new relationship between men and women? Thinking of this, the two female elders looked a little unhappy, and the eyes they looked at Ruger were also like looking at scum. The female mage was a little more reserved, while the female warrior almost lifted Gustav up and shot directly at Ruger. Fortunately, the witch was afraid of any misunderstanding, so she stopped her partner and asked Anya in the tone of an elder, "Your name is Anya, right?" Seeing her nod, the witch pointed at Ruger and asked, "Who is this person to you?" It was the first time Anya was asked this question, and she suddenly felt a little dazed.